Homemaking. So much that we can say about this. So much is already being said about this topic. We're going to be talking about dressing for the day and the way that we view chores, and as well as your identity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about C.S. Lewis and the Sisyphean chores or task. I want to encourage you to sign up for the newsletter because there's so much more content that is being shared, but it's in written format. So you want to make sure that you're signed up to Muse Better if you want something better to muse on. I'm Felicia Lee, by the way. If you're watching the video for the first time, we talk about faith, femininity, fro, and a lot of the messages are for new wives. I was talking with a friend some time ago, and she's a homemaker. She recently she's a homemaker, and we were just talking about the difficulties that comes with transitioning from working full-time to being homemakers full-time. In this video, whether you are homemaking full-time or whether you work and you obviously still keep your home, this is going to be beneficial for you. I personally made the decision after I got married that I was going to transition straight into full-time homemaking before I had children. Because from what I've been hearing from the moms, you love your kids, praying that, by God's grace that we have children. If we don't, it'll be a different, not a different shift, but things will probably be different. But it's a decision that I wanted to make because I didn't want to jump straight from working all the time right into having children. So I needed at least 2 years to sort of get my bearings on marriage itself and life, and sort of do a whole lot of the things that needs to be done before I sort of transition into that. Anyway, that's a whole other story. So I made the decision to become a homemaker before having children. I say that knowing how I used to think about homemakers or housewives who did not have children. I remember the first time I actually met someone who was a homemaker but didn't have children. And I was in her home, and she said, I asked her, oh, so what do you do? And she said, oh, she's a housewife. And my first thought was, well, what in the world do you do all day? I looked at her house. Her house was sparkling clean. It was really nice. But I figured, after you clean, what do you do? I had a very, very, very shallow view of homemaking and what it entails. Now, 2 years in, things have changed. And there's still a whole lot of ideas about what homemaking entails. We're not going to go so much into that. But just a few things that I want to address, especially if you are a full-time homemaker. One is we need to make sure as women, men too, but there's a channel specifically for women, as women, where our identity lies. I never knew how tied up my identity was to what I did, my job, my career, my achievements, until I became a homemaker. And when I left full-time work and now I'm engaging with people and talking, and it's like, oh, so what do you do? And I found myself sort of stumbling and almost hesitant to say. At first I wasn't hesitant. I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm a homemaker. And then it would follow up with, so what do you do? Or what does that mean? Or how do you spend your time? And as I began to notice how people were reacting, that made me I began to feel this sort of, not that I wasn't convicted on what I needed to do or what I wanted to do. I knew that there was no way I was going back into working full time unless there was some, other reason. But it was more so, I began to wonder, who am I now? Is it just homemaker? For me, it was way more than, just homemaker. But as I interacted with people, I began to realize, I need something more substantial to say. It was so much more attractive. When, I was a master's student, I'm doing my master's, or when I was in radio, I'm still in radio, but I'm a radio host. I work in media. I'm a magazine editor. I'm a professor and so forth. It's almost like that sounds so much more, it's so much more palpable to say. It's almost much more attractive. And I began to wonder, why does that seem so much more attractive than for me to say I'm a homemaker? And why do I feel, even when it comes to homemaker, because this is something I noticed even on YouTube, that our identity can become so wrapped up in that, and we sort of use it as this almost like boasting thing. But recognizing that I thought a lot of who I was wrapped up in what I did, what I accomplished, and the job that I was doing. And so when that was taken away, and now you're interacting with other people, you begin to ask yourself, well, who am I? What do I do? Mind you, the same way that we can do that with our careers and with our work, we can also do that with our marital status. We can also do that with our career as homemakers, think that therein lies my identity. And when I'm talking about identity, I'm talking about the thing that gives you value. What gives you value? Is it your work that gives you value? Is it your role as a homemaker that gives you value? Is it your role as a wife that gives you value? None of those things should be the things that gives you value. Not being a mom, those things are important. Mind you, that's not, those things are very important. But you have to remember, if our identity is wrapped up in anything that can be taken away, then that, and our value, our identity, who we are, is wrapped up in those things. If those things are taken away, we lose our sense of self. We lose who we are. So if you are, let's say, a nurse, I'll go with that. Teacher, because I used to be a teacher. If you were a teacher, always wanted to be a teacher since you were 3 years old, you just knew you wanted to be a teacher, and that's your identity. It's a part of your identity. But if that's where your values are all wrapped up, if for whatever reason that teaching position is taken away from you and you can't be with your students, you will feel like you've lost yourself. If your identity is wrapped up in you being a wife, and God forbid you lose your husband, and that is where you found your value, you're going to lose yourself. Even if you are a homemaker and that is what you think gives you value, if that were to be taken away from you, you will lose yourself. And I am saying this from a position of recognizing that this is a struggle. It is still a struggle. The Lord has brought me a long way from where I was. But it had to be, he had to walk me through, and is still walking me through. Felicia, your identity is in me. In Ephesians chapter 1, a very beautiful chapter that I encourage you to study, we're reminded of all of the blessings that we have in Jesus Christ, how we are adopted. We are called the sons and daughters of God. Oh, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we are called the sons of God. That is your identity. That is what gives you value. The fact that you were created and loved by God, and Jesus Christ laid down his life for you, that gives you value. And nobody can take that away from you. Nothing can separate you from the love of God, as it says in Romans 8. Nothing at all. They can take the career. Life can take your husband. You may not be a homemaker. You may never have children, or you lose your children, whatever it is. All of these things can be taken away. But who you are in Jesus Christ, that cannot be taken away. So make sure, whether you're working, whether you're a homemaker, whether you're single, whether you're married, whatever your status is, make sure that your identity, and you know that what gives you value is in who Jesus Christ says that you are in him, that you are saved, that you are redeemed, that you are more than conquerors in Christ Jesus. That is what gives you value. So that's the first thing to remember. If you're transitioning from working full-time into being a homemaker, if you're a mom and you're looking after a lot of kids, and you may be looking at other people and think, their life is of more value and they're doing more important things. When you remember who you are in Jesus Christ, it deals with 10,000 problems. So that's the first thing that's really important if you're struggling and sort of finding who you are as you transition into being a homemaker. The second thing I want to address, there's this quote by C.S. Lewis. I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but he talks about the role of a homemaker. And he says that, the chores, the tasks that you have to do might feel almost Sisyphean, I think that's the word that he used. And Sisyphus is in Greek mythology, I believe. And he was, I'm trying to remember the story. He was in death, essentially, to be punished by the gods. His punishment was that he would roll this huge rock up a hill, and the moment that he gets to the top, the rock would inevitably roll back down, and he would have to roll up this huge, it's more like a boulder, up this hill again, up this mountain. And he would have to do that for all eternity, and that would be his punishment. And so he's exerting a whole lot of labor, a whole lot of effort, a whole lot of pain to accomplish nothing. Because the moment he gets to the top, the boulder never actually reaches the top, it just rolls back down. And so C.S. Lewis describes sometimes how a housewife or a mother might feel, or a homemaker might feel, that most of the work that she does is sort of like a Sisyphean chore. You're exerting a whole lot of work, a whole lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of pain, and you feel like you don't accomplish much, especially if you have young kids. You know, you clean the kitchen after breakfast, you clean the kitchen the night before, then it gets messed up for breakfast, and you clean it, and then it gets messed up for lunch, and then you pick up the toys, and the toys are back on the floor, and you just feel like you're doing the same things over and over and over again, cleaning diapers and breastfeeding and changing clothes and doing laundry and folding laundry and putting it away. And then it could feel, you know, what is the point of this? And then I was reading Ecclesiastes chapter 1, and it reminds us of sometimes the work that we think we're doing does not have any value, but it is accomplishing something. What do people gain? This is from Solomon. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north, and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. So it's almost like how he's describing the sun rises and then it sets, and it rises and it sets, and you know, the wind just goes around and around and around, and all the streams flow into the ocean only to end up back where they. So it's like, well, what are they accomplishing? You know, the sun is doing the exact same thing every single day from the moment that it was created by the Creator. It's been doing the same thing for thousands of years. But let the sun decide for one day, if the sun could decide, not that it can decide, but imagine that the sun decided for one day that it was going to do something out of the ordinary course of things. Life would immediately end. Obviously, God could still sustain life, but I think you get the point. Like, even though the sun is doing the same thing every day, and it seems almost mundane, it is mundane, but it is only because the sun is doing those things, that thing that seems so mundane, so routine, so monotonous, that is what allows all other life to thrive. The wind, even though it's circling about and about and about, it's only because that the wind is doing that same monotonous thing that all other life can exist. The streams flowing into the ocean, then flowing back in the same water cycle, it's that same monotonous thing is occurring. It's because of that monotonous task that all other life exists. All other things can happen. So you might feel, as a mom, as a homemaker, as a wife, you know, you clean and then it's dirty again, then you clean and you do, and it feels like your tasks are so monotonous. But what you are doing, first of all, it is seen and valued by God. Do not dishonor the Lord by comparing your task with another task and saying, that thing seems so much more grander. I wish I could be doing that and not wiping babies' bottoms all day. The greatest task that God gave a woman was to care for a baby. Mary, the highest honor that any human being could have was to bear the Son of God. Of course, it doesn't mean that other tasks weren't great. Other tasks were absolutely great, and God used other people in powerful ways, right? But he didn't ask Mary to be a queen. He didn't ask Mary to do something that we think would be grand. He asked Mary to do something that seemed and deemed, especially in today's society, something so low, so humbling, so unattractive, to bear a child and to raise that child, for that child to know his purpose. Many of us would probably have said, Lord, don't you have something bigger for me to do? Don't you have something better for me to do? And of course, this is with the realization that there are many women who will not be able to have children. I'm sitting here at the time of recording this video not knowing that I'll be able to have children. I hope. But again, my identity can't be wrapped up in that. But if God calls me to that, which in likelihood, if there's, nothing wrong, the Lord calls me to that, it is a high honor, a high and holy calling. So let's never underestimate the tasks that we do and consider them to be low, to be almost beneath us, because they don't get the accolades and the praise that all of the other things get. Not putting those things down, not saying that they aren't important, whatever you might consider to be a grand task. Being a teacher, being a doctor, being a lawyer, all these things are wonderful. But whatever task the Lord has called you to, do that with all your might and be diligent in it and honor the Lord in that. If God calls you to be a queen, for instance, I'll say a neurosurgeon. If he calls you to be a neurosurgeon and you look down on that task and you prefer instead to shine shoes because you say, you want to do something more humbling, you dishonor the Lord, because that's not what the Lord called you to. But if he called you to shine shoes and you despise the shining shoes and you say, instead I want to be a neurosurgeon, I want to be up there, you dishonor your Lord. It is not the task that is the holy thing. It is the one who gives you the task, and he sanctifies what it is that you are doing. It is as we are obedient to the Lord and the calling that he has on our lives. That is what counts. And just the final tip, and I won't spend a lot of time on this. If you're a homemaker, ensure that every day you get up as much as possible, This should be routine, because it's just like work. It's just like any other work. It's just in your own home. That you get up and you dress for the day. You get ready for the day. That you have structure and you have schedule. It's not just lounging all day, not doing anything. I really thought when I became a homemaker I'd have way more time on my hands. I'm more busy now than I was when I was working full time with all the things that I'm doing. And when it comes to chores, laundry, cooking, cleaning, those things are only a slice of the whole cake that's called homemaking. There are so many aspects of it. And ensuring that you're rested is very important. Hospitality, opening your home to others. The Bible says that it's in entertaining strangers that Abraham entertained angels. Ministry and service. The Neowise Club, I encourage you to join, was started, through homemaking and a lot of other service that ministry that my husband and I that we do. Frugality, being very wise in how you spend your resources, and your resources would include food, your time, how you manage your time, money as well. Entrepreneurship is also another aspect of homemaking. Doesn't mean that every homemaker has to be an entrepreneur, but that is a part of homemaking as well. Training other women, according to Titus chapter 2, that women ought to train other women how to keep their home and how to raise their children and how to love their husbands, so that the word of God may not be maligned. This might look like having maybe the teen girls from your church come over and help you with the kids or help you in your home, and in that way you're training them, preparing them, making sure that you're educating yourself and self-development. It's very important that you stay well read, that you keep your mind sharp, that you educate yourself on various topics, that you are advancing the kingdom of God. But of course, at the top of that is what you are called to do in regards to your role as a wife, being a helper to your husband and supporting your husband. And if you have children, being a mom to your children, being present for them. And all of these things that I listed, it's all, of course, there are priorities. Your relationship with God, nothing comes before that. Nothing comes before that. Then it's your husband, then it's your children. Your husband first, and then your children. That might be controversial, but you're raising your children to be adults and to leave you. Your husband, however, is the one whom you're supposed to be with till death do you part. Your children are still important, but God, then husband, children, and then everything else, making sure that you keep those things in priority. There is so much more that we could say about homemaking. It is something that I love, that I enjoy thoroughly, and it is an act of, my faith has been strengthened in this calling more than anything I have ever done. It calls for a huge level of faith. One of the things that I face with when I talk to other women, one of the things that I have to deal with, still have to deal with, is the idea, the notion that, being a homemaker is for those who make a certain amount. You have to be living at a certain level in order to do this. I'm of the belief and of the conviction that if God has called you to something, He will sustain that life. He will make that way. We are by no means rich. Oh, how I wish we were. We are not. One day we're working on it. But if God calls you to a life, He will sustain you. As a Sabbath keeper, one of the questions that you face in regards to not working on the Sabbath is, especially for someone who has a business, how can you afford to close your business on the day that you might make the most business? But we see this example so well in the Bible, when God gave that command to His people to rest, and He said, pick up manna, take up double manna on Friday, and that will sustain you on the next day. And other times He sustained His people. We believe in faith that even though we're not working on that day, that the Lord has 1,000 ways, 1,000 means by which He can sustain His people. We have to exercise trust that if God calls you to it, He will sustain you. I hope this was a blessing. This was a lot that was shared. I would love to hear your thoughts. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and also to join the New Wives Club. I'll see you in the next video.